Yeah, so we are online. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Do you enjoy Jenkins world, DevOps world? Yep. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yes.
So we just had lunch, I understand.
Okay. We're getting reaction from them. That's a good start. So can we get our slides after?
Maybe.
Yes,
Yeah.
we can. So hello again. Thank you all for joining. We're gonna talk today about Jenkins configuration as code. It was mentioned a couple of times already as Jenkins' new superpower, which is great. But before we start talking about Jenkins configuration as code, we'll talk a little bit about ourselves, but very short. So my name is Adina. I work as an IT consultant at Pragma. It's a Scandinavian-based company. I was a software developer before, but I got really into Git and Jenkins, and I wanted to do something in that area. And this is how serious I am about CI. When I posted it in one of our GitHub issues, Nicola asked if he can quote me on that, and I agreed, but I didn't really believe that he'll do that.
Yeah, I just had it a few minutes ago, so.
Yeah, well, thank you so much.
But you have something to compensate. You were elected.
Yeah. So thank you also for adding that. I just won a most valuable Jenkins contributor award for Jenkins configuration as code plugin. And the most important announcement, if any of you decide to take a picture of us during the presentation, I really need to share it with my mom. So use my mail address or my Twitter handle, whatever. Please share it with me. I need it. She's missing me. She's far away. Anyway, up to you.
So I'm Nicola. I'm working by JobDes for a few years. So I'm working with CTO Koshiki Kawagoshi on research projects. So my involvement on config as code. And I also sometimes have bad quotes. Right, so this is my way of doing CI, which I don't even try to compile on my computer. I just push and force push to fix. So I can pretend I did it right the first time.
And then he says, let me force, and we don't let him, but he still pushes. But anyway, well, you trust us. Configuration as code is great. It's like written by very serious people, so yeah. So, 2018 is everything as code, it seems. Infrastructure as code, environment as code, architecture as code, of course, CI/CD as code.
So, as I say, the last book on Jenkins file cookbook, it doesn't really exist. So, if one of you wants to write it, you're welcome.
Yeah, I was actually thinking that you're planning, but okay, yeah. We need it. We need it. So, well, why not manage Jenkins as code? And it is kind of happening in some areas. So we have Jenkins Infrastructure to be managed as code. We have Jenkins job configuration that is already for some time managed as code. And Jenkins system configuration that, well, will be managed as code pretty soon. Jenkins Infrastructure, you want to elaborate?
Right, so you have tons of ways to manage Jenkins as part of your infrastructure as code. You have CLI, REST API, you even have client library like Python Jenkins. You have client library in Java, in Golang, which is used by Jenkins X, and Chef, Ansible, Docker, image. So that you can set up a Jenkins server or Jenkins containers with whatever tool you are used to have. That's supposed to be already something that has been done and ready for adoption. What's just the missing steps now?
Yeah. Well, JEP's configuration, well, this is something that most of us probably already use. At least that's the impression I got from talking to you. Simple example of JobDes, like many of us already seen that. So yeah, the most interesting part, Jenkins master configuration as code. As an enthusiast Jenkins user said, Jenkins can be installed through native system packages, Docker, or run standalone by any machine with the Java runtime environment installed. And this is great about Jenkins.
Yeah, cool.
But it has to be configured manually, and then the Jenkins user is not so enthusiastic anymore. So this is not very readable, but still it's just like a small piece of configuration that you can like see with your Jenkins, and you scroll and scroll.
Yeah, that's the modern web UI of Jenkins. When you want to set up a fresh new Jenkins, you have to spend hours within those forms searching for the correct option. That's And we had this suggestion to use Selenium to automate installation by launching a headless browser. Thank you, Guy, for suggesting this. But we have another option.
Yeah. So we don't always love this UI. Sometimes it is useful. I'm not saying we just hate it, we don't want to look at it, never. But it would be nice to not have to look at it, at least when we want to spin up new Jenkins. So we want to get rid of that when possible. So how do we solve it? It's not like Jenkins configuration as code is the only answer. It's obviously the best answer. But there are some options available for you now, and I'm pretty sure that many of you also try to use init Groovy script, Scriptrel, SCM sync configuration plugin.
Which is more or less maintained.
So that's this emoji about?
Yeah, so init Groovy files are extremely powerful, but might be a bit hard to maintain when you are not a Java developer or a Jenkins contributor. So that's, you have to write such things. And when you are an ops guy and you have to manage both your Git server, LDAP, whatever, Nexus, Jenkins, and all that sort of things, probably that you write some Python or Bash, but not Groovy.
So we've decided that we want to find a better solution for that. And like we kind of decided it separately, not knowing each other. And then we found out that we're not alone. There is already a lot of different people or teams trying to solve that problem, like system config DSL, plugin, XML templating, various Groovy bindings. Pragma, company I work for, had a I would call it still a prototype, Jenkins as code reference, a tool that was using Groovy scripts to configure Jenkins. And this was the first Jenkins I was configuring for my customers was using Jenkins as code reference, and I loved it because it made me feel so safe. I had all the configuration written in some kind of configuration file with properties, and I didn't have to take screenshots of configuration anymore, so I wouldn't have to worry about making any changes. I was doing that before. And then Nicola was working at CloudBees.
Yeah, we had this same idea as a follow-up for the system config DSL, with one idea in mind that there is a huge amount of plugin. We already had to manage migration of plugin to adopt pipeline. So we wanted something that would work out of the box for all plugins, or most of them, which was a challenge.
Yeah, when we found out by some people that we both knew that we are working on a similar solution, or maybe we share the goal, just the technical approach was different, we decided to join forces. And we started working together on the plugin last summer. My focus was on the real world used by customers because this is something that I was dealing with on a daily basis. And this smart guy had some more requirements, already mentioned out-of-the-box support for our products.
Yeah, we were used to have this relation with the community to get some new API adopted by all plugins or find some way to manage the huge amount of plugins in the ecosystem. And so clearly the technical approach were very different, but the IDs, the higher level IDs in terms of use case, were very interesting because you were really focusing on actual users who were already adopting this approach of configuring Jenkins as code. So at day one, we already had users. They probably suffered some breaking changes, but that was some real world from trenches feedback that we get.
And we had an online meeting where KK was participating, and he started with presenting his idea and, first of all, his requirements for the tool that we were considering to working on. And it was so great to hear that what I had in my notes prepared to share it with him was exactly what he wanted, and like it gave us a lot of energy and hope. So we've decided we're doing this together. And we will try to make it as easy as possible. Not easy for us. It's not like super easy implementation, I must say, but it must be easy for users, whoever wants to benefit from configuration as code plugin. So that's the general idea. There is a YAML file that contains all the configuration. By all the configuration, I mean things that you would normally configure after clicking Manage Jenkins in your Jenkins UI. So global configuration, plugins you install and configure security tools. So you prepare the YAML file. You, of course, install the configuration as code plugin on your Jenkins. You feed the plugin with the configuration file. And as I said, whatever is under Manage Jenkins should be configured. And it takes seconds.
Less than seconds, yeah.
So it's much faster than doing this by clicking inside the UI, unless you click super fast. But yeah, so the main benefits of the plugin, safety. So if you're smart enough to keep your configuration file in some, I don't know, GitHub repository, or like not necessarily GitHub, but some repository, some version control system, you can always track back if you make some change in your configuration file and you reload configuration and you want to apply new changes and then you get stack trace. It's not the end of the world. You just revert and then you're back to working instance.
Yeah, that's an important point, that the plugin itself doesn't enforce you to use a specific version control system. You can plug whatever you use. You can get those files updated by your Ansible cookbooks, or just store them in Git, or maybe in CVS, that still exists. Right.
Well, you can even store them on your local disk. Like it's totally up to you. The best way for you to feel safe about the configuration you store. Then we have traceability. That is also a natural effect of using version control systems. So you can see who made change. And if something is maybe not producing stack traces, but is making Jenkins behave in a weird way, you can always go through changes that were made in the file and see who to blame. Speed, I mean, we're not making Jenkins work faster, obviously, but I already mentioned that if you wanna, if you wanna have a new Jenkins that is similar to another Jenkins that you have configured as code, you can just copy configuration file, make small changes if they are even required, and you can have using Docker. I'm pretty sure you can have working Jenkins instance fully configured within minutes.
Yeah, and it's really important, this idea of speed, when you are writing those configuration files, that you can really check the change in your Jenkins without having to fully reload a fresh new Jenkins every time. Just change the YAML, click the button, you have the results, and you can cycle a lot in a test environment before applying to your actual production Jenkins server.
Yeah, I have constantly running some Jenkins in a container that I will hopefully use for a very short demo during this presentation. So I can apply the configuration that I want to apply on another Jenkins, the one that we don't want to break, and test the configuration. And then a couple of seconds, I put it in the right file, in the right place, repository, or on a hard disk, and the changes are out there. Easy to use, easy to reuse. That kind of comes together. So I already mentioned that, we said we want you to just write a simple YAML file, and there is not a rocket science. So it does not require you to have some deep technical knowledge. You don't have to be a software developer. It's not a Groovy script that you have to write. It's just a very simple file. Reusing, as I said, you can just copy the file and reapply on another Jenkins or 10 another Jenkins instances if you want to. So there are some challenges.
Yeah, so we want that you have something that is human readable. So for those of you who try to directly manipulate the XML file on disk, XML is supposed to be human readable, right? We also consider that Jenkins, so we can write lots of documentation on Jenkins, but there is something that you know about Jenkins, it is a web UI. So that's sort of a natural documentation, because that's something you discover, and you will search for the exact same thing you have seen on UI in the country. We want to configure everything Jenkins, so not just Jenkins core, but all the plugins. And if possible, we want to support all plugins without any extra effort from plugin maintainers. It's not strictly true. They have to conform to some convention, but that's very reasonable. And I say that we consider UI to be a natural documentation. This doesn't mean we don't need documentation. So we generate documentation and we generate tooling. So we have schema and we could generate some validation tools or whatever integration could be useful for users so that it helps to write your config file the right way.
Yeah, we're going to elaborate a little about some of those. So human readable config file, we had to make a decision about the format, and you already know it's YAML. And why it's YAML? Well, it has a structured content. It's not language centric. So it doesn't matter if you're a developer or not, if you know some syntax or not. It's like, I can't imagine anything more simple. It's readable and commentable, and like this is all important. But the real reason is that when I started working at Pragma, I got a keyboard laptop with a Danish keyboard, and like for months I didn't know how to make curly brackets, and I kind of found a way. It requires me to use 3 keys. And then I got a new Mac, and for some reason it has a Swedish keyboard, and it's different setup, and it's like, oh. So no, we're sticking to the file without brackets. And there is only one very simple tool that you really need to use to write proper YAML. So yeah, indentation matters.
Yeah, that's something to know. So one reason we selected YAML, so it's pretty popular at this time, and also compared to, let's say, JSON, it supports comments. Remember that you want that config as code can be reused, which means that you can share some samples, and if you do so, you need to share comments to explain what you are trying to do within the file. So that was also one of them. And also, another point is that we don't try to make some scripting language. You won't see any way to loop within the config file. If you want to repeat something, up to you to have a template engine to generate a long YAML file based on something else. But what the config as code plugin is expecting is just a plain YAML file. So maybe we will see sort of a Helm for Jenkins config as code to appear at some point.
Yeah, maybe. You mentioned the web UI can be treated as a documentation. So we try the structure to make the structure of the YAML that you're expected to provide to reflect the web UI. It's not like 100% accurate yet, but in many cases, like if you ever configured Jenkins via UI, you can figure out how the YAML should be structured with the help of the documentation.
Yeah, there is few exceptions. But yeah, you find the general idea, and you have here a concrete sample when you have Jenkins root elements, so exactly the same as getting to Jenkins manage and configure system. And you will see that you can set up the security realm using the LDAP plugin, which has a server, a cache, and as well you can configure tools, so you can define where is Git installed. So nothing really surprising when you see such a file. That's really more or less what you would expect.
Yeah, and that's just an example. Configuration as code has more features. I mean, provide you to configure more, not only that. This is very important. Configure all Jenkins initial setup, no hands. So with the plugin, you can get your Jenkins install instance, a fully working Jenkins master, with your jobs configured. We did not develop a new way of describing jobs, but we give you a possibility to use your existing JobDes scripts or Jenkins files to produce the job. So when you start up your Jenkins with configuration as code plugin, if you have your jobs described in some language, you are able to, you will have them in your Jenkins. Support all plugins. Yeah, that was the trickiest part.
Yeah, actually, you can imagine within the plugin, we have various APIs that we expect target component to implement. And we provide some unicorn, black magic, voodoo components that do it for you as long as plugin follows some conventions, especially in terms of web UI. Remember, we want to mimic web UI, so it makes sense. And most plugins support this, and some of them, for various reasons, weird internal design or legacy backward compatibility don't really follow this model. So for the few of them, we need to provide what we call glue code to provide some sort of an adapter. That's always an option. So if there is plugin maintainer in this room, that's clearly the last way to be config as code compatible.
It's very easy if your plugins are not compatible with Jenkins configuration as code yet. There is a high chance that it's very easy to make it compatible. And we have some documentation for plugin maintainers that will be further developed. But what's there already should be enough for many of you to make your plugins compatible with Jenkins configuration as code. Some plugins have very weird architecture, and it's not as easy to make them compliant with JCASC, how we sometimes call configuration as code. So we created this additional configuration as code support plugin that, well, if you are going to configure one of the plugins with this weird architecture I mentioned, you may see a warning that configuration as code support is also required. We hope that in the future all the glue code or fixes will be moved to the plugins and configuration as code support will become obsolete.
Yeah, for the first release candidate, we wanted to support major plugins out of the box. And for those, we create such a glue code. And what we expect is that we can get this specific code adopted by target plugins. And doing so, maybe that can, at the same time, they can change a bit their design so that those adapters are easier to write or maybe just not necessary anymore. So we also generate documentation, validation tools. What we have in mind here is to provide IDE support, command line tools to validate whatever can help you to ensure that the YAML that you are writing will be well designed for your target Jenkins and that you have a great experience writing YAML despite the problem of the indentation. Yeah,
so Jenkins configuration as code, JCASC is supposed to apply all of those things that we just said, and what you can see here is a link to the GitHub repository where we keep the configuration as code plugin, and two documents from that repository are also linked here. Well, I understand that you can't get links, but I hope we'll find a way to share the presentation with those of you that are interested. Implementation details and plugin developers markdowns created by you.
Yeah, so the slide will be available as a link on our GitHub repo, and in the slides we have the link to the GitHub repo. So yeah, it doesn't help. But yeah, so everything that you see here as various links to document are up to date.
Yeah, so
Demo
to
time.
demo. Yeah, and yeah, fingers crossed. Now, this demo will be very short, and it actually is very easy. I already have a Jenkins app. I use a Docker container, and I use Docker Compose to tell my...
Say hi.
Hi. Can I continue? Thank you. So I use Docker Compose to only provide the information about the location of the configuration. I have a Jenkins image with configuration as code plugin pre-installed, and I use variable, environment variable. Everything is explained in the documentation, so I will not go through that for now. And I have configuration file here. Maybe I can make it a little bit bigger. So it's a simple configuration. And so if you want to use the plugin, you have to prepare your YAML. You have to install the plugin on your Jenkins. And you have to tell the plugin where to look for the configuration file. And now I'm going to make a change, like a very complicated change. So I'm going to change the system message. So just to make sure we are on the same page. Current system message says Jenkins configure automatically by Jenkins configuration as code plugin.
It's a pretty long message.
Yeah.
So I think it's shorter.
Oh, well, it's going great. I will make it shorter. So it will be hello DevOps world. Yeah, looks okay. We don't have a tool to check the indentations, but I hope they are okay. So yeah, to reload the configuration, oh, I'm logged out. You go to Manage Jenkins. Actually, I'm already there. And somewhere on the bottom, if you have the plugin installed, you'll see the configuration as code link. And it tells you where the configuration is currently loaded from. I have it in a Docker container, and I use a file that I just mounted to this container. And I click Reload. And that's it. No restarts necessary. It really didn't take much time. And yes, it says Hello DevOps World. So
be ready to hit this button multiple times because you wonder if it was really applied or not, because it's extremely fast compared to reload from disk if you already hit this button. And then you can have 1 or 2 coffee with friends, watch a football on TV. And when you're back, Jenkins is ready. So it just happened within a second. There is no restart. Your job are still running behind the scene. No interruption.
So yeah, like we're all about automation, and then I make a change and I manually reload it. We'll actually have some ways, and maybe we'll implement more ways to automate the reload, but there is an API available.
Yeah, so there's button UI, CLI, REST API, and you can imagine everything to get plugged on this feature.
So you can discover the change in the file and make it reload automatically if you like really trust yourself. Yeah, so how it works.
So the idea behind config as code is to consider that you have your live instance, and here the voodoo is supposed to generate to introspect a data model of your Jenkins. And this data model is used to drive a YAML parser, generators for documentation, schema, and all that sorts of things. Thank you. Sorry, so the introspection part, so if you are not a Java developer, so introspection in Java is away from a Java class, a live Java class to get access to all fields, methods, constructor parameters, and all that sort of things. This allows us to get everything about Jenkins core object itself, all the so-called descriptors in Jenkins development model, so the equivalent of the global configuration you have on the web UI, and various components that we have added as part of the config as code API. All those are just discovered at runtime. And based on this, we create a hierarchical data model, so with the core element and all the attributes that you can configure. So there is some basic rules for this voodoo to apply, which rely on the web UI data binding used by Jenkins. The idea behind this decision is that we know that plugin maintainers take care of the web UI. That's probably something they test a lot during the development process. So we know that this one is when there is some change, the new fields added to the configuration, the web UI comes with it. And so if we rely on the exact same mechanism, we are always up to date. So we have documentation to help plugin maintainer understand what we rely on so they don't try to invent some very clever way to manage the web UI that would break compatibility. And we've already made some pull requests to some of the major plugins. We generate documentation, so you have a sample here. It's in one, but you have here the general ID that you see the Jenkins root element with the various attributes, the possible values, which are links to other sections in the document. You see at the bottom, you have an excerpt of the help message that you used to see on the web UI. It's introduced directly in the documentation, so same attribute as the same description.
Yeah, and just a comment, this documentation and schema are both linked on the configuration as code page I used to reload my configuration. So when you click at configuration as code, you'll get the links both to documentation and to the schema.
Buttons for this purpose. So we generate as well as JSON schema. So despite the name, JSON schema can apply to YAML as long as your IDE supports this feature. And this will help you to get, so we can imagine having more tools generated the same way. And there is corner case. That's Jenkins Ecosystem. And so for those, we have to generate some dedicated configurator classes. So under the hood, so here comes voodoo, unicorns, and all that sort of things, and some dragons. To explain how it works, we will consider the YAML to Jenkins path of the plugin, because we also have the reverse way implemented. So if you start with such a YAML document, from the plugin point of view, it's just plain text. So have no idea what it's trying to do. And we know about a Jenkins root element in the YAML and a tool root element. So in terms of API, the plugin defines what we call a root element configurator, which need to be implemented by plugins if they want, and we provide some default implementation. So as you can guess, to match Jenkins root elements, that's just the Jenkins singleton object on your Jenkins master. So the other ones, so tools like we had in this sample and security are the groups that you can see on Jenkins configuration management. You know, you have the global system configuration. You also have security management, tools installation, and maybe a few others to come later. All those are discovered by introspection. And we also follow the management link, all the links that you have on Jenkins manage within the web UI. We are trying to find which component is behind this. So still this idea to mimic the web UI. And there is some special cases. So typically the credentials has a dedicated component for this very specific use case. So we always have this option to say we try to detect everything, and sometimes it fails or there is a mismatch, and then you can implement the adequate API to just fill the gap. So now that we have a root element identified as a Java class, we can check for all the sub-elements, the so-called attributes. So here, security realm. So an attribute is just, we have a name for it. We know a type because we can introspect the code in a Java class. We know if it's a single element or a list of elements, and we know how to set the value, which is the interesting part. And so typically, Jenkins Java class has a set security realm, so the name of the attribute, and has type security realm, so we know what we are trying to configure. But security realm actually is an extension point, which means it's an abstract class. That's not something we can implement. We need to find which plugin do provide the actual code for it. So we need to find an implementation. And the way we do is that we take the live Jenkins instance, we search in the class path for every available implementation. So in this sample, we have 4 of them. Let's say we have the 2 first one of the default that come with Jenkins, and you have installed LDAP plugin and Active Directory, so you have 4 options. And what we try to do is to avoid you have to write the full qualified name of the component you want to use, but something that is human-friendly. So Jenkins has a concept of annotations that let plugin developer define the names they want to use. And if they didn't, we just guess some name, because Java developers like long class names. So when they implement a security realm for LDAP plugin, they name it LDAP security realm, or maybe LDAP security realm imp, just in case. And so we can just guess that LDAP sounds a reasonable name for this guy. So now we have a concrete class that we can instantiate. This class has a constructor. So it's a data-bound constructor. This is the one used by the web UI. So we know that's the correct way to create this component. This is the way you create one when you configure the web UI. That's not another constructor here for testing purpose or whatever. That could be just a partial implementation. So this one is safe to use. And so we have another set of attributes, and so on and so on. When plugin developers make change, they can rename some attributes, create a fresh new one, and provide code to migrate from the previous config to the new one when you just upgrade the plugin. But here we just have the latest, the current version of the code. We don't know what was the previous one. And developers in Java used to have the deprecated annotation to say this code used to exist, but please don't use it anymore. There is another method or another attribute to do the same job a better way. And so we have options to say, let's start config as code with support for deprecated method, because I want my configuration to load. I will get a warning, that's fine, but I don't want to break my Jenkins installation. We also are considering ways to offer better labels, because sometimes there is some glitches in the naming. And we still have those weird configurators that we had to create for corner case components sometimes. We expect not to have too much for them. And so that's the case for the credentials plugin. So here you have the sample on how to configure credentials. So the system credentials that match the global domain, so there's no specific name for it, with here is a SSH private key. And so for this guy, we had to create a credential root configurator to manage the specific design of the credential plugin. So we won't get into details here. So the status of the project. So we just released 1.0. Woohoo!
Yeah, we basically released it and got into planes to get here, so we're really hoping it works. But no, I'm joking a little. We know it works. We know it has issues, of course. We welcome your feedback. We are monitoring Jenkins users' mailing list, but I would say the issues on GitHub in the repository are a way to go to report problems, and we have a Gitter channel for configuration as code.
Yeah, you have the link to Gitter on the top of the GitHub page for the repo, and it's pretty active forum. So please join if you have any question or suggestion.
There is a group of very active contributors that are trying to help each other solving the problems, and if you want to try and you experience any issues, I encourage you to visit, to use the Gitter. We're there too, obviously. So what are the features, main features? Well, you can read the configuration from your local drive or URL, or use REST API or CLI.
Yeah, you can also push configuration to Jenkins with a REST API or CLI.
You can reload configuration, that's important, what I just did in my very short demo. And you can export existing Jenkins instance configuration into YAML. So if you have Jenkins that is already configured and you consider migrating to configuration as code, there is export feature that will help you, but will not make everything working perfectly for you yet.
Yeah, that's mostly a way for you to see what it should look like and write your own, or maybe to compare. Let's say you already have set up Jenkins with config as code in some basic set. Then you go to Web UI to make some minor changes, and then you export again to see what changed between them. That could be a good driver to, maybe you can give it a try on your demo instance.
You sure?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay, so we go to manage Jenkins and configuration as code, and somewhere here we have export configuration. There is a warning that basically contains the information Nicola just said. And I export YAML, so yeah, let's call it. And I hope it will be possible to compare. So this is the YAML I used for configuring the Jenkins, and this is the one that I just got generated. And you can see there are some
Dragons.
Yeah, there will be some stack traces. There's nothing to worry about. As we said, this generated YAML is a way for you to get some help how to start writing the YAML, but in most of the cases it won't be possible to directly apply it as a configuration.
That's the reason we dump the stack trace within the YAML. We don't break the export for it. Just say, okay, this one I failed to export, and we still report why, what happened, because if you ask for assistance, it's the best way for us to check if there is really something wrong, or if just, okay, this plugin is not supported, we know why.
But in many cases, the configuration looks very, very similar. For example, the global libraries. This is the one I used again, and this is the one that was generated. So most probably, if you use this part of the YAML, it will work for you.
Maybe you can also see the generated documentation from the live instance.
Mm-hmm. So the reference contains links to documentation and JSON schema. So this is what you get. All the root elements and attributes you can configure with some more complete or less complete help messages. It all depends on how it actually is implemented in the plugin that you're trying to configure.
So and here, yeah, so you start at the Jenkins root element, and you have links to possible values. So here you can switch to global matrix if the link works.
No, they
doesn't. Okay, never mind. So yeah, you have a pending fix for this.
Yeah.
So anyway, the idea is here we still need to fix few details. Let's call it somewhere to help you have everything you need to write your YAML file.
There is a compatibility dashboard because. So the plugin is written in a way that it automatically detects how to configure plugins. So there is a number of plugins we didn't try to configure, and they will work with configuration as code. So we don't provide you the list of all the plugins that work, and we do not provide you the list of all the plugins that do not work, because we did not test all of 1,500 plugins yet. But we tried some of them, and some of early adapters tried some of them, and they report issues. So you can use Jenkins Jira to report issues, and use JCAS compatibility label, and it will end up on the compatibility dashboard. So you can have a look there and check, and maybe you'll know from the very beginning that, well, you need to wait a little for this plugin to be used.
So
and
during the contributor summit, we just added another document to list all plugins known to work or not. So the list so far is empty because it's really community to just help us with a very simple pull request to say, okay, I tested this guy, it's okay. Or I tested this guy and I logged this issue on Jira because something is wrong.
Yeah.
So we expect this to grow. This is what the pipeline team did, and it's pretty efficient.
And I think it's important to realize that if you are using plugins and that are not supported by Jenkins configuration as code, it doesn't mean you can't use it. You can mix configuration as code with, for example, Groovy hooks. And I know we said at the beginning that Groovy hooks are like maybe not the easiest way, but if you're really into configuration as code, maybe you can try. It's possible to mix those two solutions.
In the meantime, until it is fixed, sometimes we have plugins who fail to export, but are okay for the import side. That also happens. So yeah, you have to find some balance.
Yeah. So I mentioned at the beginning that we, at my company, had some solution that I loved, but it had some pains, and I wanted to get rid of those. So I knew what I wanted, and Nicola knew what he wanted. But we didn't want Jenkins configuration as code to only solve our problems. So we have created, we've decided to use the Jenkins Enhancement proposal process, and we have created documents that is still available and is a place where the community can discuss the overall, like, quite high level, I would guess.
Yeah, that's really the motivation we have, why we selected some technical approach. So there is no implementation details here, so it's pretty readable for everybody. And the main benefits of this doc is if someone comes today and asks, why did you do this way, there is a better way, you can say, hey guys, there is a document for it.
Yeah, you should have said earlier. No, really, we're like open to changes. So, no. So yeah. We're presenting it because we want you to know what is Jenkins configuration as code, so you can give it a try. You can report whatever is missing, broken features, missing plugin support. You can contribute test cases. That's a little bit easier. You can contribute fixes. It's not so easy. Please don't contribute bugs. Nicola is doing that, so we don't need more. Sorry.
Few of them.
So yeah, again, how to talk to us. Of course, you can talk to us like now, but I mentioned GitHub issues, Jenkins mailing list, and the Gitter channel are the easiest way to get in touch. Questions? So, if we have time for those, I don't know what time it is. We have 1 minute.
Yeah. So this picture is me writing bugs and force pushing to. Yeah, you have a question?
Is there a plan to replace the configuration as code with the regular config XML file for the main configuration?
So the question is
why
yeah.
not putting effort
Yeah, so the question is to know if we plan to just replace the persistent mechanism in XML and sort of something, write a fresh new way. So what we try to do here is to get current Jenkins have config as code. If you have read last week, Koshiki did a blog post on modernization of Jenkins with cloud native Jenkins and Jolt in Jenkins. And one of the questions is if we consider this new generation, let's put it this way, of Jenkins, and we want config as code in this domain, probably we will come with some approach that is comparable but not exactly the same. And that's an opportunity to get this experience that is already useful to provide new generation of config as code. On the other side, the way Jenkins today stores things in XML is not what you would like to do by yourself. That's really the technical bits that component store in memory that is just dumped to disk. So there is another JEP on this specific topic. So comparable at some point, but probably complementary.
Okay, I guess like we have to empty the stage for the next speaker. So like you can still talk to us.
Did I mention that I have stickers?
Yeah. Thank you.